Okay, in this lesson, I'm going to talk about selecting within Photoshop. Okay, so we have a few selecting tools on the left-hand side here. Now we have the rectangle marquee tool, and you can press M on your keyboard to also bring up that tool. And then we also have, if you click and hold on this icon, you can see that we have a few different other options in which to choose in order to make selecting. In fact, anytime you see a little arrow at the bottom right-hand corner of an icon, you know that there's other options to choose from. So for move, you have artboard tool. For the tool right below it, the lasso tool, you have different type of tools for that. So just keep in mind that there are more tools nested within this icon. So anyway, if I use the rectangle marquee tool and I have that selected, now we have a few different options here at this this sort of like an attributes over here for each of our tools. So with the marquee tool, what you do is you click and drag while still holding down your mouse or stylus. You can see that you have this marquee that you drag around. Now you can also hold down your space bar and move the marquee around. It stays to that side, and keep in mind your mouse button is still held down. And then when you release, you release your mouse button. You can see that you have your marquee around an object that you want to move. So the same applies to your elliptical tool as well. So I'm going to deselect this, and you can go to select and then deselect, or you can also go to Command D on your keyboard to deselect. That's what I usually do. I go Command D to deselect. And you can then go to your elliptical marquee tool. Same situation, but if you click and drag while holding, you can see that you can make an elliptical shape with your elliptical tool. So same applies if you hold down your space bar. You now then can move that marquee anywhere you want. It stays to that size, but you can move it anywhere within your document. Okay, so now what you can also do, and let me go back to my rectangular marquee. If I click and drag and then hold down Shift, you can see it constrains to an exact square. So no matter where I move my mouse, as I hold the button down, you can see it keeps to that perfectly square marquee. And as well for your elliptical marquee tool, hold down Shift and it keeps it a perfect circle. Now we also have these other options here. We have single row marquee and single column marquee tool. So I'm going to go to single row, and if I just click, you can see I get a marquee that goes across the entire document in a horizontal selection. So I'm going to click again just so I can have it over one of these objects. And I'm going to zoom in, holding down Z. I can then zoom in by clicking and dragging to the right. We can zoom in to our document. And that zoom will zoom right into the spot where the cursor is. So you can see that we have this 1 pixel by the entire length of our object, of our document. So this is good in, say, in case, say I have this image or this layer selected and I want to delete, I can just delete 1 pixel row of that layer, whatever's on that layer. So I'm going to Command Z to undo, and then Command Z to undo again, and then deselect. So there are situations where you want to use your selection tool to say maybe cut out a piece of your object. So what I'm going to do is drag a marquee, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press either Command C, which is copy, or Command X, which is cut. So if I go to Command C, it's now this object, whatever is in this marquee, is now copied to my clipboard. So if I move this over to this area over here and I press Command V, now it's going to paste in that copy into a new layer. You can see as I close the visibility of this layer, you can see now that is on its new layer, but I still have the piece that I selected still part of this other object. And like I said, I have auto select on, so if I select this, you can see I can still move this around. So I can move this over to the side. Maybe I want to add in a little graphic here. There's other options to do that, but say you wanted to cut a piece off of another graphic or image to use within your layout here. You can do that. Now, if I used cut, I say I select this and want to make sure that I cut this. So I go to Command X, it's going to cut away from that image, but it's still going to be in my clipboard. So if I make another selection, paste, it's going to paste that in, but it's also going to cut out that one image. So it's just, however you want to work, but I just want to show you that that's something that you can also do as well. So that is the selecting of this using these tools. Now you also have a few other options right to the tool right below it. You have a lasso tool, which is the same situation. It's the same selecting as you did before, but it's drawn in freehand. So you get a selection, but if you click and drag, as you're holding down your mouse button, or in my case, I'm using a Wacom tablet, if you're holding down, you can see that now you have just that selection. So this is good if you have something very specific that you want to cut out, that a more angular selection from, like, say, the rectangle or elliptical you just can't get this around. So say you wanted to just select this little feathered edge from this graphic and make sure I'm on this image here. So I'm going to select this layer, and now I have this little tiny piece selected. So what I then can do is Command C and then Command 1 to bring this back out to full view. And now I can and then I can just select using my lasso tool and then paste within that selection. So I can do that as well. And then if I need to, I can transform, Command T to transform and get this particular graphic out, and then just simply move it around. So that's another way you can do that as well. Now, if you have, say, for an example, if you go to the polygonal lasso tool, this is a particularly good use. And let me go to a new layer. I'm going to go to here, and this icon here, and that'll give me a new layer. And say I wanted to go to a selection, and I want to pull this out, holding down Shift, and then I'm going to go to my color picker, click on this on our foreground, and then I'm going to go to, say, this pink here. Click OK, and then I'm going to go to Option, Delete, and that's going to fill that selection with the foreground. So let me deselect. Let's say I wanted to have, a little angle here where I want to put in, say, for an example, something that will give me a little bit more information, sort of a dog ear graphic on the corner here. So this is where this polygonal lasso tool is also very useful. So if I click and hold down Shift, you can see where I get this, freehand, but if I hold down Shift, it'll constrain to a 45-degree angle. So then what I can do then is go to click again, and then click again, and then click again. And now if I release the Shift, I can just connect this end to my beginning point. Now you know that because if you hover close to that beginning point, you can see a little O. It sort of closes off. It's an icon that lets you know you're closing off this marquee. So if I get close to it, I see that icon, then I just click, and you can see now I have this selection. So now I have this layer selected, I have my selection that I want, and now what I can do is just delete. And now I have this little corner that I can use for something else. So I'm going to deselect, and I'm going to bring this over here. And then what I can then do, I have a bunch of different options. I can bring this over on this side. I can bring this up top here, maybe transform, rotate that around, whatever you want to do. But now I have options that I can use for this graphic. Maybe that's not a particularly nice looking layout, depending on what you want to do, but you can then utilize this graphic however you want. You can also mask it off and do a few other things. But the point is that you have this tool that allows you to click, 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 and then you can close that off depending on what you want to use. So these are just options. You're going to find that as you're designing something, you're going to be using a lot of these different tools in a lot of different situations. Sometimes you're going to be using all of them for a lot of different ways. So let's take a look at this graphic over here, and I'm going to go to my Move tool. And say I like this little squiggly kind of graphic over here, kind of just using a brush tool and just making a little squiggle. And say I maybe want to put it as sort of a background to this graphic here. A lot of times what you want to do is put this in your layout and then put something on top of it, say this 25% off. However, when you move this around, you realize, wait a second, there's a white box around my graphic. So if I go to this layer and I hide it, you can see that it's on one layer. And this pops up a lot within design. You'll be given or you'll get something on the internet and it'll just be flattened. It won't have a transparent background. So you're going to have to use our tools here in Photoshop in order to take this background out and clip it out so you have this graphic where it doesn't have a white box around it. So in this case, what we can then do is go to our wand or our magic wand. So what you can then do is, again, you have some options up here which you can use. And if I click using the magic wand, what you can see is it's going to select whatever color that you have. And this will get a little tricky. This is very simplistic. It'll get a little tricky when you're using a photograph and you have lots of different variations of color, but these are very flat colors, and this is a good way of explaining this tool. If you're going to be selecting a background, make sure it has a solid background. And so what I mean by that, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see how this is a very clean edge. And when I mean clean, it doesn't have lots of gradients, it doesn't have lots of variation in terms of its color. It's just white and black. So if I select this, then what I can then do is I have a few different options here. So in this situation, you can just simply delete. Press your delete key and it'll cut out away from this object. However, if I deselect by pressing Command D, you see this white edge that goes around your object. And you even have some little spots in here that are have a little bit of white. And this isn't a very professional look. That doesn't look very good. So even if you're going to be using it as a background, and let me pull this underneath our little graphic here. So I'm just moving this down underneath the layout, this layout folder. And actually what I want to do is I want to open this folder and then pull this in and put it underneath our elliptical here. And I can slide this around. But even still, even if it's going to be in the background, you still really don't want to have that look. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo. I'm going to press Command Z a few times to get us back to our original selection here. So what are another option that you can use to make sure you don't have any of those white little spots? Well, in some cases, you're going to may have to do some manual work. But let's try to use the program as much as we can in order to remove that white background, those little white marks. Well, the first thing what we can do is we can go to our select, we can go to modify, and we can go to expand. Now the reason why we want to go to expand is we have this white background selected, and you can see that by this marquee tool that goes around, and it's selected on this, around this little shape here, around our little squiggly shape. Now we can reverse this selection. If we go to Shift Command I, we can also, Command I, and that will reverse this selection. So if you go up to, say, inverse, Shift Command I, you can see that now that is going to be reversed. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep this selection and we're just going to expand. So I'm going to go to Select, Modify, and then Expand. And we're going to go to Expand by 1 pixel. So I'm going to press OK. And now I'm going to delete. And you can see that we cleaned up our selection pretty good. We still have some white marks here, and we can then use a manual process to get rid of some of those extra marks. So let me show you another way where we can kind of clean this up a little bit more, even more. So if I double click on this layer and then I go to, say, color overlay, you can see that we now have this selected, but it cleans up all our white marks. So if I go to the blue and our color overlay on our blend, we can go back to our black. Now you can see that it completely clears up anything that we might have down there. Now if I move this into position and put this underneath, and then what we can then do is just work on composition and making sure that we have it in a spot that we like. If we need to transform this, right now it is a rasterized image, but we can still move this around and get it into a position that we like. And we could always change the background of this if we need to. So what I'm going to do is go to color overlay and maybe make this a darker gray, something like that. So that pops out a little bit more. So there is one other thing that I want to show you with the selection tool, or the magic wand, excuse me. Now we have a tolerance that we can adjust as well. Now this is going to be good if you say you zoom in here and I want to go to this graphic and I'll go back to my magic wand, and you can see we have a tolerance at 32. If I select, you can see that we have a good edge around it, but just as before, it's not very close. So what we can then do is we can go up to this tolerance, and you'll notice this is something that you can notice with a lot of different options within Adobe Photoshop, is that you'll see these two arrows. You'll have your hand symbol icon, and you'll have these two arrows. That means that you can then move this kind of like a slider and increase the value of this number. So you can move it left or right depending on how much you want to adjust this tolerance. Or you can just simply select this and then type in a value. So we're going to bring this up a little bit and then make this selection again. And you can see that it's getting tighter and tighter as we adjust this tolerance. Now, you can also go in the reverse way. Say you want a little bit more tolerance, and that will get that even closer. And then that will give us even a tighter mark around our object. So I think I said that wrong in the beginning. So as you bring up your tolerance, you get, depending on where you select, you can get this pretty loose, and then if you bring this even tighter, you can get a tighter amount, a closer amount with the marquee tool.